servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I want to start with the statement that central to scientific endeavour is an environment that gives permission for the work of talented people to challenge the status quo, to develop ideas, and to deepen our knowledge and understanding. This work demands a creative and innovative spirit, courage, objectivity, and a deep respect for the scientific method. Universities had and should once again have a central role to play in advancing thought and finding better ways of doing things. So therefore, their scientific staff must work in an environment that supports academic freedom. The Dalai Lama said, quote, "In order to exercise creativity, freedom of thought is essential." One Nation introduced these concepts and requested action from the then Education Minister, Dan Tehan. And I commend Senator Stoker for commenting that the government supports this initiative. Senator Tehan took these comments from One Nation, these concepts from One Nation, in particular from Senator Hanson, and he made sure that the now Education Minister, his replacement, Minister Tudge, continues to champion true freedom of speech in academia. One Nation wholeheartedly, therefore, supports the new and expanded definition of academic freedom and hopes that no one will ever need to endure what Professor Peter Ridd is still going through to fight for these fundamental academic freedoms. Professor Ridd was an employee of James Cook University for nearly 30 years, and he describes his experience of standing for academic freedom against that university as feeling hunted. Peter's crime, so-called crime, was to question the quality assurance of research outcomes related to reef science. But it is his duty as a scientist to question, to be rigorous, and to protect the integrity of science. Every scientist's first duty is to be a sceptic and to challenge what he or she is being told. Quality assurance is a concept that many corporate organisations are familiar with, and they do not invest money, time, energy, effort without that quality assurance. Yet it seems some of our universities have strayed away from the discipline of the scientific method so much that they don't feel the need to justify research outcomes or deal with challenges to quality and assurance. Considering that billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is funnelled into policy development based on so-called research, then it is not negotiable that these research outcomes must be above reproach. And when we consider that the opportunity cost and the consequent cost is in the trillions of dollars for a whole nation of some policy based on so-called science, it is essential that science is challenged. Now, I have listened firsthand to many cane farmers and industry bodies from North Queensland and Central Queensland who attended the hearings into water quality in the Great Barrier Reef. These farmers, these community members, are exasperated and say they've trusted reef scientists to get the science right. But that trust has been destroyed, and instead cane farmers are being publicly demonised. And the reef regulations reflect a systematic abuse of science based on assumptions, not evidence." End of quote. Communities are being gutted. Apart from the destruction of so many livelihoods, think of the cost to our society, to Queensland, to communities and to our nation when policies are knowingly based on poor science, which by definition is not science. Energy policies, climate policies, renewable energy policies based on so-called science are costing $13 billion in additional costs above the normal costs of electricity. That's an average $1,300 per household across Australia, in addition to the cost of electricity. For every job, so-called green job, created, there are 2.2 jobs in the real economy destroyed. The Murray-Darling Basin Act, the Water Act of 2007, is now destroying communities across the Murray-Darling Basin, our #1 food bowl. And it's based on rubbish that contradicts the empirical evidence. Any scientist worth their professional reputation should have the freedom to stand against poor scientific outcomes and the lack of appropriate peer reviewing. I'll go beyond that. It is the duty of every scientist to do so. The professional integrity of scientists should compel them to defend spending billions of dollars of taxpayers' money on policies that do not have a robust scientific basis, that are destroying people's livelihoods. Now, Professor Peter Ridd has over 100 scientific publications, and he has co-invented a worthy list of instrumentation, including an instrument for monitoring the effect of sediment on the reef, which is technology now used around the world, a water current meter that is marketed by James Cook University worldwide, an optical system for measuring pipe wear used in mines Australia-wide, and a system for managing agricultural weeds marketed through AutoWeed. Now, this is an impressive list of achievements, and after 3 decades of work, such a scientist ought to be held in high esteem. So if a scientist of this academic calibre and commercial achievements and practical nous can still feel hunted down by a university for challenging the quality of research results in other departments, and hunted to his emotional and financial detriment, how the hell can we ever expect our upcoming brilliant minds, with far fewer runs on the board, to ever have the courage to do the same? We can't. The simple answer is these newcomers will not challenge because they do not have the safety of freedom of free speech and can't risk their careers crashing and burning before they've started. Instead, these upcoming brilliant minds will fall into line and continue to expand the increasing pool of homogeneous groupthink. And there is the death of creativity and the narrowing of truly great solutions to tomorrow's problems. In recent decades, we've seen our society, our country, being decimated by policy-driven science. And that is not science. It's costing us trillions. We need to return to science-driven policy. Policy that is driven by science, true science, that passes quality assurance tests and questions from sceptics. Professor Ridd has become the modern-day Galileo for daring to challenge the common myth that farming methods in the Great Barrier Reef catchment areas are damaging the reef. Professor Ridd's research shows that commonly held myth to be incorrect, to be a lie. James Cook University didn't like it, maybe because there is no doubt, in their view, that there would be a gaping hole in James Cook University's funding for Great Barrier Reef research if water quality was indeed just fine, as Professor Peter Ridd's work and the work of others confirms and suggests. Now, I acknowledge that universities are required to enshrine in their policy statement clear messages around freedom of speech and academic freedom. While we cannot intrude upon the enterprise agreements between universities and their employees, the amendment I will put forward today in committee stage requests that higher education providers must take reasonable steps to ensure that enterprise agreements include provisions to uphold the freedom of speech and academic freedom. This commitment to academic freedom needs, wherever possible, to move beyond the policy statement that sits on the shelf in the enterprise to enter the enterprise agreements, since that is where the cultural change will be brought about. We cannot afford to be timid and ordinary when it comes to scientific endeavours. One Nation supports this bill because we must give our scientific staff the academic freedoms they need to be at their creative best. Universities, businesses and governments all need to be prepared to update their outdated views when our brilliant minds in academia show us a better way. I'll finish with the words of Steve Jobs, talking about his company, the late Steve Jobs, talking about his company Apple, one of the leaders in the world in new technology. He said, "It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do." Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy President.